Hi there, welcome back to the Dylan Rounds case, arguably an extremely deep, interesting look into the case and some key conversations made and responses to comments. Now, over my shoulder, that is a bottle of water in case anyone creates any kinds of conspiracies there. But that aside, welcome to everybody that is currently here in this live premiere. Be sure to share your thoughts and opinions in the live chat as we go on in this video. As I said, it's very deep, it's very interesting, and I do stress it's best to stick around from start to finish to truly understand everything. There's been too many misunderstandings within this case and community. It's time to, in a certain area, part of the case, to make it a lot clearer and get deeper than ever, okay? You can treat this as some kind of mental, psychological exercise or what. You can treat it as a learning curve to this case and the people possibly involved. But it's much appreciated if you do stick around from start to finish to understand everything. Now, this video was supposed to be about the latest news article on the case, but that will have to wait for now, because this video did take a different, unexpected turn when looking at comments in the chat. Interesting, important ones to say the least, which were acknowledged today, but when the video came about was done a couple of days ago, okay? This video was supposed to be looking at comments from the last video and the news article, but this video got so deep and just so deep with thought and all kinds of possibilities that time-wise it was dragging on, couldn't get to the other part, so hence why we'll be doing it in the next video. But what I do want to say in advance, apologies if later into this video, when getting to the comment section, I mention anything about looking at the news article today. We're going to be looking at it in the next video. So apologies in advance there. Things took an unexpected turn tonight, okay? But for the better. Understand that. You know, for people that are watching this video late, catch up on a different day. Make sure to stick around as well. I mean, yes, people can fast forward and everything, but try to stick around from start to finish to understand everything. And if you are late and you want to leave your reactions and thoughts, whether you agree or disagree, leave your comments down below in the comments section. And for those that are in the chat right now, if you want to elaborate further or later, leave your comments down below. More engagement helps keep the Dylan Rounds case alive and out there for people to see, because, you know, people do walk away from time, so try and revitalize it if possible, okay? Down below, there are some additional links if you wish to check them out. And as well, just before we go any further, shout out to Cleo for last night, her super chat, good of her. Shout out to Jim Coddington and King Samoan for their gifted memberships, and Watcher Crazy for her support too. Much appreciated of them. And in general, whether it be now or later, if you need to escape from a certain dark reality, you want something light-hearted, change of scenery or change of topic, theme, less serious, check my video out from last night. It might help you. Top right corner of the screen, you click on the eye symbol, the video will be there for you to find and catch up on, as well as the playlist to the Dylan Rounds case to catch up on that as a whole if you have missed any videos. So the order of how we're going to do things today, I'm going to look back at the comments of the last Dylan Rounds video I did and answer any questions if necessary, and as well respond to additional points, and for the main discussion to begin from there for this video. So I hope you enjoy it. Let's get straight into it now. Here we are. I'll just adjust the comments to the newest and we can start from the bottom, work our way up. So we've got Cleo there. We've got Bill Brooks, looks like a new person to the channel. Welcome, saying, how does Bibbins fit in? So I think what Bill is referring to here is, how does Bibbins fit into the Dylan Rounds case? How would he fit the role of a suspect or a person of interest? Well, might be able to tie that in later with Badger's comment, so don't go anywhere, Bill. I think I can answer two at once. We got Linda returning, but a different Linda, saying, "Was Dylan found? I haven't been on here for a long time." Well, that's unfortunate, Linda, because there's been a range of coverage with time and there's been new findings as well. But to explain it all in a matter of sentences wouldn't be possible at this moment. If you do return back, Linda, make sure to catch up on my previous videos because things have been found. Dylan may not have been, but other key evidence and all these kinds of new discussions coming forth, as well as the hearings with Brenner, the preliminary, the court cases, I've been documenting it all, okay? Yes, it is a stamina war, not everyone can hang, but, it's all documented on my channel. You take it at your own pace, and you do what you can to catch up. Linda saying, if Brenner wants a deal, did he say where Dylan is? Right, so Linda, how far back were you watching my videos? Or should I say, when did you stop watching my coverage on the Dylan Rounds case? Is this before March 3rd, 2023? If so, that's understandable. If after that, then it's a bit confusing because I have covered and explained certain elements. Beatrice, shocked, okay. Cleo, blew my mind once again. Thank you for the map analysis. You're welcome. It's good that people still enjoy them. We got CFL, also known as Corey, the real Corey, supposedly. But what doesn't help is there are some people that are on Corey's side who have also labelled this account as being a fake. So there seems to be a bit of back and forth going there, which isn't great, is it? Okay. I'm not directly saying that this is a fake Corey account, but I've heard other people claim it's the fake Corey account, and they are the same people that have been talking to this account on other live streams. But we'll read it anyway. So this person says, just a note, the attorneys are the ones who present plea deals to the judge seated on the case, and that judge is the one who decides to allow the plea or not. It is not the family who accepts a plea or has any authority in that decision whatsoever. Dylan was considered an adult and a judge will set two people in place for Dylan's voice case. Note, cell phone was on the edge of the bank of the pond, not in the water. Phone found shortly after Ty Corbin walked away from the spot back to his own car, in which he followed the LE out to Lucen Pond on the day after handing Robert over to LE in Montello, supposedly. What are the responses? Skeptical says, interesting, there was someone else at the pond at the time, LE, and supposedly Ty Corbin was there to witness this, and then shared the information with others. Was it also shared with LE and / or the family? Doesn't really fit with Dylan's family's evidence they have to charge James Brenner and hopefully convict him. Corey says, Justin Rounds and his daughter and her boyfriend were there and Robert Aviles. They seen it all, and the LE and the searchers in the water who had already searched the area around the pond, all were very aware of the whole thing. Again, Brenner is not the one who murdered Dylan. His arrest charges are for being in possession of guns and out-of-state other charges. So, Corey, why is Brenner officially charged with the murder and desecration? Why is Brenner charged with the murder and desecration of Dylan Rounds and it's been done formally in court? Okay? I mean, another question, maybe a better question, Corey, with what you supposedly know of, how do you think it's going to go in the future when the trial comes around, if it does actually get to that? Do you think that Brenner will be sent down, or do you think something will change? Let me know your thoughts down below. But let's carry on reading. So Corey says, Brenner is not the one who murdered Dylan, gun charges only, and be in possession of them out of state, other charges, the latter. Possible suspects of knowing and or helping move Dylan was add on to other charges. Brenner indeed was squatting at the tool shed, grain shed property. Kurt and Ed Harshbarger had everything to do with that issue. No keys to gates were at the gates in a pipe, so no problem of entering for anyone. They all knew that. Well, I don't remember hearing it described as a pipe where the key was. I heard that the key was dumped in the bushes, so that's changed with time. anything else. They all know that old Kurt, Don with a line going for it, which is weird, Brenna, Ed, etc., us, and Ona. Kurt and Don verified that Brenna drove the grain truck to the shed. After Don and Brenna went to check on Dylan, after Karen called Don, Brenna did not back the grain truck in the shed. There was no room to do so. He took it over to the shed because Karen said that Dylan left a message. It was going to rain, and Brenna half-brain response of, well, maybe I will just be able to use it for harvest and jobs. Brenna has an alcoholic brain mentality. That simple. Chase was camping at Lucen Pond, hiding out from Wadsworth's, and Robert was running back and forth with Chase for whatever they were up to and doing, as well as driving up to Utah. Drive time from Lucen to Utah about 1.5 hours or less, and Utah is where Tracy and her own dad picked Chase up, apparently 10-hour drive from Montana, and then drove right back up to Montana on Saturday late. Around 11 p.m. Chase stayed with her about 24 hours until his own father came and got him and took him back to Utah to his place home where Chase's children were staying. Tracy gave full details of what took place with Chase and what he said on the trip to Montana from Utah, as well what happened to her place in Montana and what was said to her from Chase. So once again, it's Corey saying all this, but I just don't really hear any other key people directly in the case saying the same thing. And there might be some elements where Justin thinks the same thing because he knows the same stuff and seen the same stuff as Corey words here, but still, Justin hasn't said anything public. Candice Cooley hasn't said anything either. What? Because she's left in the dark because people can't trust her? Well, once again, it's just that situation in general that you got a third-party representative giving this information out. Has it been reinforced by a form of consistency with others? I've just not seen it myself. Maybe other people have. Let me know your thoughts down below, people watching this video in the chat. What do you think of these details provided by Corey? Was it this first bit here, up here? Yeah. So I need to respond back to this, what Corey states here, whether it's true or not, on the basis that it is true, okay? There's still a valid point to be made. I'm going to explain right now. So where to say that the family aren't the ones in charge. The family don't have the decision to accept or reject, let's say. It comes down to the judge. It comes down to the higher-ups to sort how things go, a plea or not. Right. At the end of the day, it all comes down to the mentality of Candice Cooley and Justin Rounds, okay? Whether they have the power or not to agree on a plea or not, at the end of the day, their mentality was clearly shown, their attitude was expressed, but they don't want some kind of deal at the end of the day. They don't want a deal. That's at least how it was referred to back then, and it's not changed since. Both Candice Cooley and Justin Rounds didn't want Brenna to reveal the location of where Dylan Rounds was buried at, because the family want to be able to find Dylan themselves. They don't want to make a deal with the devil. They are making it harder on themselves, but they feel confident enough that they can bring Dylan home. So whether you call it stubbornness, pride, getting in the way, dedication, whatever it may be, it might have slowed down the process. But they think that they can get it done and they can bring Dylan home, right? So, end of the day, plea or not, even if they don't have the final decision, the family, they have already explained, cemented it with their mindset that they don't want any offer. They don't want Brenna to have some kind of deal in which he can reveal information in which he might receive benefits himself, whatever that might be. A reduced sentence, less time spent within. Because Candice Cooley did outline it in an interview and it was documented, but she doesn't like the idea of Brenna being released in the future because it could lead to another family, another innocent person out there being harmed by a dangerous individual like Brenna, right? And this thing, even if Brenna is supposedly not guilty of Dylan's death, Brenna can still be considered a dangerous person from how he's been deemed in court, the way they brought up those documents and deemed him as a danger to society, the general public, but as well, simply tracking back and looking at the past records of his criminal history of getting in trouble, causing damage, harm to people physically, can be considered a threat. So that was one of the other reasons why Candice Cooley didn't want any plea deal, whether she's in charge or not. It's the mentality, it's the attitude that's most important. End of the day, Corey, hopefully you can understand that. Was there anything else to mention here? Not much else, because there's still some questions I need to tie in afterwards. We got Abdulhal Azimi, I've probably said that very wrong, apologies about that, saying, glad this case going to end. I hope you search and investigate in Panama Girls, because there are a lot more photo and stuff. Yeah, those backpackers. I do remember seeing some documentary coverage online where it showed photos, timestamps, and it looked like it was lost in the jungle. It was dark, nighttime, and the photos were very random. One was taken maybe of someone's leg or someone's hair, and it just ended abruptly. A bit random. Maybe we'll try and get into that if possible. As for copyright material, I don't know how that will plan out unless you can get the odd screenshot from somewhere and then analyse it, learn on the spot. Glenn, shout out to Glenn. King Samarin, TRT, Vita for the Horde. Sorry, I up and vanished faster than the Shack Lady's dust particles when Ron Tello and his nappy-headed sidekick Badger Life hit her with the old geriatric punticular, whatever that is. The tribal chief has spoken now. Bow down or face a certain maneuver for eternity. Okay, interesting comment. Now, I think one thing to acknowledge, and I'm not going to click on it because it'll kick me off my own comment section, but when you look at King Samarin and you look at his profile picture, my God, that looks like a man that has seen World War I and II and III all together. But King Samoan has been stuck in the trenches since day one. Literally looks like a veteran. He's seen it all, man. He's seen the whole fruit salad of Nancy, and he's gone the full distance, full 12 rounds of surviving her BJJ technical abilities. Well done, King Samoan, the only individual to overcome the mountain. A monumental victory. Congratulations, man. Anyway, moving on. We got Rachel saying, I wonder if this guy, Bibbins, is involved in Summer's case or Aidan Clune's case. Food for thought. At least in my position, my thoughts, I've not thought about that. Okay. I don't know if there are any links. I can't really say at this moment in time. But in the future, if I could pick up on the odd thing, I'll try and suggest it, right? I know we looked at the Dylan Rounds case suspects like Kurt Wadsworth, how others were claiming Kurt Wadsworth was tied to Aidan Clune's disappearance, that Aidan Clune on the day or the day before when going to one of those motels had a cross-dressing app in which he communicated with Kurt Wadsworth, who's also a cross-dresser, and then they hung out and it all got dodgy and frisky. That's what other people said, okay? Not me. Does seem a bit wild, seems a bit far-fetched, but you know how things can go, right? And you've seen how the community has gone too. But if at any point there is a valid observation to make, I'll do so, okay? At this moment in time, I'm just focused on the possibilities that Bibbins could be involved in the Dylan Rounds case some way or another, okay? Christy kind of responds to Rachel, saying, Rachel's comment on your previous video is interesting. You are right, Warlight Ref. No normal person would even think about making money out of a missing person's story. That's what I normally would think too, but I have a sister. I don't talk to her anymore since 6 years ago. She would literally make money out of our mother's dead body. Wow. So growing up with a person like her, I pretty have a hard time believing in genuine, good and caring people when I see and hear certain things. And in the Dylan Rounds case, I heard a lot of BS, especially from Candice Cooley. I really have a hard time trusting her, but that's always only my opinion and instinct. Thanks for the video, very interesting. So it's good that Christy has given a bit of backstory here, some kind of like story from her own experience of what's happened back then. It makes it a bit more understandable as to why Christy would be somewhat cautious with family members, but external. I'm going to say external. I'm not directly meaning her own, but how she might view, others out there, strangers, as a family, a unit, that it's not always perfect within, that there could be something going on somewhere. So yeah, I understand why Christy would be suspicious or a bit cautious when it comes to family members in the Dylan Rounds case. All I can say is from my own experience when covering the Kenny Veach case with certain family members in the Veach family, there might have been a few questionable or slightly strange reactions or lack of responses from people there. So, you can always apply it to other cases, maybe not full on, but you can still be cautious. Use that framework from your own experiences as it might help you in the future. I might be able to implement that in terms of Badger's comment too, but we'll get to that eventually. Response-wise, this random channel saying Candice Cooley is all about the money. Justin's family was watching her, concerned before he went missing. When Justin is not around her, he is more relaxed and can talk. Candice Cooley controls the situation. But that's the thing. If Justin feels better away from Candice Cooley, Justin is quite reserved, keeps to himself, which isn't a bad thing, and he does what he does in the case, which can be considered good and maybe the right way to go. But if you, from the general public's point of view in that area, and you want to learn about the case, you want to hear about the updates, you might not actually hear them from Justin, which, from the general public's point of view, could be somewhat disappointing, okay? It might be for the right reasons, but still, you'll be lacking on some information. Candice Cooley, okay, could be criticised for not always being accurate and slipping up at times, but at least we're getting some coverage in some way. Better than nothing, right? Because what would you rather want at the end of the day? To hear roughly about the case of a missing person and only hear about updates of it 5 years into the future? Or would you like some kind of correspondence, some kind of daily or monthly, weekly update schedule? Even if it is a bit rough around the edges, at least you're following the case. Because I'm sure there'll be many people out there that are interested in mysteries, missing people cases, true crime, who also enjoy or are interested in that daily or weekly update type of system, whether it be through the news channels or a third-party way. It's something to listen into here and there, right? Or maybe on a regular basis. I think maybe some people out there forget that when the coverage stops, it really does stop and it does go quiet and dead. I can only say that from my experience, okay? When it comes to the Kenny Veach case, I've done my coverage in the past, got criticised at times. When I felt like there wasn't much more to cover, I moved on. And then people really did feel the silence within that community, because I was, at the time at least, was one of the only ones consistently doing it, right? So you only know when it's too late, right? Just click that off for now. What else do we have? We got Skeptical's comment here saying, interesting. When we were at Sun Tunnels, I believe we saw that container through binoculars. The trailer must have been hidden behind it from our vantage point. We thought it was part of the property that has the private tyre-lined road, which we also thought was Kevin Bibbins. Map analysis makes sense. It is a separate living situation with the truck and trailer. Okay, so that's good of Skeptical to describe it from her point of view, being present at Sun Tunnels and also seeing it for herself as a witness, which is very good. That can also explain why on Google Earth, why the road or a certain part of it looked really dark in colour, because as Skeptical mentions here, lined with tyres, black dark tyres, and that's why they show up pretty clear on the satellite imagery. So that's interesting, that. Moving on. Skeptical says, the name Kevin Bibbins caught my attention very early on in the case. I figured he was cleared because his name hardly came up again. But yes, I do think he may know something. So here's the thing. You can say suspect, you can say person of interest, you can say witness. It can fall under different categories, okay? So that's like what we've been looking at recently. He might not be the murderer, but he might have heard or seen something. So that's what we're questioning. Skeptical also says, the focus early on was not about Dylan Rounds until Warlight Ref came along. So then those truly interested in Dylan's disappearance had somewhere to go to get a complete analysis and stay focused on that. Your prediction is spot on. Well, that's good to hear by what Skeptical says. That's positive. What can I remember from when I came into the case early on? I don't know I can't remember too much. I know Salty Pancake's early presence of going out there, recording this and that, which was useful. Different points of view, I understand that. When it came to everybody all partying and gathering together, as we see nowadays, they hate one another and it goes back and forth like a merry-go-round, okay? But back then, people getting on well, but it doesn't mean to say much progress was being made, because I guess one way of looking at it is you can measure, you can measure how the case went based on the fact that I was able to come in early on and think outside of the box and go off track from the narrative at the time, because even that imploded on itself. Says a lot, right? But it's good if people are able to feel focused here or feel somewhat calm compared to everywhere else. I know people with time have mentioned those type of experiences. Hopefully it still applies now. Moving on up. Skeptical saying, thanks, Raf. Have a good day. Appreciate that, you too. Hopefully you find this video interesting as well. And Badger Life's comment says, so anyone who lives out in the Lucin area that gets arrested is a suspect in Dylan Round's case. Let's just say you lived in the middle of nowhere and someone was murdered and you happen to have a felony. Would you feel unprotected without a gun? Not amused at all by this video. So it looks like Badger Life wasn't too pleased with my coverage on Bibbins recently. Well, I'll try my best to respond back to your comment, Badger, and elaborate if possible. But first, let's see what the responses are. So yes, patterns and possibilities. But what does Nancy say? Nancy says, missing and murdered people are not amusing subjects. Anyone living in the area who knew Dylan or his family or actually works for Dylan is someone who possibly knows part or all of what happened. Maybe Bibbins had an informal agreement to have a gun outside of town, only on his property for security reasons, but brought it to town. I don't know if you have a restriction to not have a gun or firearms. Can you still have a crossbow for protection? So some key points there mentioned by Nancy. I can't remember if Nancy has been around for some time, but I'll say in general, welcome Nancy to the channel. And I saw your other comment too, so I appreciate that. What does Badger say? Badger says, and still you have no clue what was said. It appears your foreign country doesn't allow for learning or laws or way of life. I hope you, Nancy, never have a neighbour murdered where your life is ripped apart, even though you were innocent. Right, so that's a bit of an interesting response. So I think what we'll do here is I'll try and do a face-to-face response like I did in the last video or so, and try and elaborate, make things a little bit clearer. So I'm going to try and maybe break it into two parts this when responding back to Badger if possible. So Badger was suggesting that just because these people who have a criminal history, who have been arrested at a certain point in time, why should that instantly qualify them for being a suspect in the Dylan Rounds case, when what they have got in trouble with in the past or recently is unrelated to Dylan's case? Well, first of all, it's just unfortunate that most of the key characters within this case just so happen to have a criminal history from back then. That's not my doing, that's their own doing, which they've done. And some may have reoffended since, okay? I guess the examples would be Chase Venstra, Robert Aviles, Bibbins, possibly Don Hatley in a way. Not quite sure what he got involved with in the past, but supposedly there's a criminal history. And of course, James Brenner. like 5 people. There might be a few others in the background too. Could be a Kurt Wadsworth as well. They've got in trouble, they've done bad things in the past, or they may have done things recently. Some vary, as you will know, okay? But they have been treated, they have been questioned in some way or another in this case. When it came to Kurt Wadsworth refused to do a lie detector test, which some people deemed as suspicious, and some people really did push it. Was there enough people protesting in Kurt's defence? No. So it was okay then. But for me to now question Bibbins, who is significantly closer in terms of the geographical location, because I'm suggesting this or that, now it's wrong to do so. But this is the thing, okay? When I did that map analysis when it came to Bibbins, first of all, I was pointing out that are there any possible, what do you call it, alibis to say that this person was actually out of town, out of state, in a different location on the day? If so, leave your thoughts down below. So before I even started the map analysis, I did highlight the possibilities that Bibbins may not have been in the location on the day of Dylan's death. But I also said, as a counterpoint, even if that was true, fast forward a day or two later, if Bibbins returned back to his place of living, he may have seen, he may have heard something. The fact that Justin Rounds was the one that brought it up, about hearing Bibbins tell him about the time when Bibbins was in the presence of Brenner, when Brenner said he was going to kill Dylan Rounds, and Bibbins overheard it and then passed it on to Justin Rounds. Okay? That wasn't made up by me. That came from key people within the case, right? So whether Bibbins is the suspect or a person of interest or a witness, there's different ways around it. As I said, at the end of the day, I don't have control of other people's lives if they get into trouble, if they have a criminal record, a one-off one, or reoccurring offences. That's not my problem. You know, I didn't tell them to do that, but it still happened. But these people just so happen to be in proximity or may know Dylan around the time of when things happened. And as the case was treated early on, it came down to certain factors. Are you within the location of Dylan Rounds where he was at the time? Yes or no? If so, you could be deemed as a person of interest. Are you in close contact with the victim or some of the other fellow people in the area, right? Such as Brenner, Don Hatley. You could be deemed and qualified as a person of interest if you fall under that category. The third option, I can't remember completely. I do remember that I did a video of this and it actually gave descriptions of what qualifies you as a person of interest under certain categories. The location, the proximity of you yourself, the closeness of who you are connected to people, such as the victim, or the people, locals nearby. And I guess third was whether you have some form of visual, auditory, witness experience. Okay, you may have overheard something, you may have visually seen something. It could be a text message, it could be a phone call, it could be a voicemail, it could be a bang sound in the distance if you were within the area. Certain encounters like that, if you're a witness, you can become a person of interest. You may know something, you may have seen something, you may have heard something which could tie in with the murder of Dylan Rounds. And if that's the case, you fall under one, if not all, of those categories. You can be treated as a person of interest, directly a suspect or witness, or just someone that may know of some additional information to provide to the police to explain and lay out, you know, the process of what could have happened around the time, okay? We'll get back to that in a second, okay? I'll try and elaborate a bit more if possible. But the other point mentioned by Badger about, you know, how would one feel if one was out there without, you know, without protection, without a firearm, that yes, this person may have got trouble in the past, but they should still be allowed a firearm to defend themselves. I don't know. I mean, it sounds like the equivalent of you come across a terrorist or a suicide bomber, well, let's give them a firearm or a bomb so they can defend themselves for the future. So they've taken out people and hurt people in the past, well, let's give that equipment back to them so they can defend themselves in the future and possibly do it all over again. One thing I kind of understand what Badger is getting at. Certain crimes may be very petty or low level, which don't really harm anyone. Crimes are crimes at the end of the day going against the law. There is some form of punishment to be met with it, right? But to be in the likes of the US, where maybe the usage of firearms, whether it be protecting yourself or being on the receiving end of one, it can be quite high out there. But not from exact experience, but from where one is located, such as the UK, the way the UK is, the way certain laws are at times, how, to put it one way or another, people that don't actually belong here are actually treated better than people that actually live here properly, okay? The laws are a bit skewed, how some are better off than others, right? Some are catered for over others. That the fact is that when it comes to the UK, knife crime is fairly high, okay? Certain attacks through animals has been high at times, okay? So in the US, you'll have gun crime. In the UK, you have knife crime. It's not as easy to get a hold of a firearm in the UK, technically speaking. So obviously, with the rise in trends and stuff, people use other means, and that's unfortunately a knife. And it's led to all kinds of messy situations and people getting harmed from all ages. But in the UK, it's harder to defend oneself because people don't have access to firearms. You just got to put up with it. Just hope you don't get stabbed. Just hope you don't get acid thrown in your face. Just hope that you don't get a pit bull biting your neck or something, or an XL bully dog, right? Messy things like that. And there's been times in the UK where people have defended themselves and they've actually got punished for it. That the criminal, whatever they've done, they've had a slap on the wrist, but the person that defended themselves, the victim, has actually gone to jail. So things can differ from country to country. The act of being able to defend yourself in general, I understand that. Not everyone is able to. Not everyone can for numerous reasons. But I guess if you're in a situation where you've done bad things in the past, but some people's mentality is you should still be able to defend yourself with the usage of items in the future, only in self-defense. That could be a bit for and against. You know, referring back to, if you've got someone that does like petty crime, really low level stuff, which does not involve the usage of a firearm, a weapon, harming, threatening anyone, but it could be stealing a very insignificant thing, but it's still breaking the law, should that person be allowed to have a firearm in the future, even if there are some kind of felon? And you know, I'm not an expert on all this, but a felon in possession of a firearm, that's not allowed, so then they get in further trouble down the line. Example being James Brenner. And wouldn't the other example be Chase Venstra too, possibly? And possibly same applying to Bibbins. You know, certain laws are laws, try and follow them. I said, I'm not an expert there, and I'm not from the US, because I'm sure if I say certain things, it might trigger some people out there. But all I would say is, if you've got a person that has used firearms for the wrong reason in the past, and have committed a crime with the usage of firearms, it might not be the best of ideas giving them that form of protection in the future to defend themselves, because there's every chance, even if it's small, that they could reoffend in the future and use it for other reasons. I mean, it's not that it follows the same line of thought exactly, but it still shows a bit of stupidity. Kind of like when it came to Box Elder, when Kenneth Cooley did that repost of that firearm being found in, is it yachts or something, Utah, approaching the Idaho border, did a map analysis of it, and the police announced that a individual found the firearm. If nobody else, you know, calls up or says it's mine, if the owner stays silent, well then that firearm is either burnt, destroyed, or gifted and given to the person that found it. Now, maybe they'll probably run a background check on that individual that found it to see if they're worthy of having it or not. And if they have got in trouble, if they are a felon, probably the firearm will be rejected and just destroyed. You'd hope to think that, but not enough context was given at the time. So depending what you know or what you don't know, you could assume and think, well, police could just hand it over to another future criminal that then could use and weaponize that item for the wrong reasons. Okay? So you'll always have some form of reasonable people, but then you get the others that do it for the wrong reasons, which then ruins it for everybody else. And, you know, I guess that back and forth push in the US with this should be allowed, that shouldn't. Self-defense should be allowed, but then it's not, and it's ruined because of others out there. It's a messy situation. It probably drags out into a completely standalone video. But to refer back to the likes of Bibbins. Bibbins, we looked at his record in the past. Again, we can talk about one's past and how it translates to the future. I'll get to that in a second. But Bibbins was involved in an attempted rape. Not exactly a good thing, is it? That Bibbins was involved with attempted murder. Now, how did that attempted murder go about? Was it with the usage of a firearm, a knife, or fist? I think either way, attempted murder is the act of a person with whatever they have in front of them, weaponizing it to inflict pain, if not a fatal result on that victim, which would be considered not too good, right? Which could highlight that that person that's attempted to kill someone is equally as dangerous as if someone did murder somebody. If the intent and the mindset is there to eliminate somebody, it makes them dangerous. Okay, it could make them a bit unstable. Can people like that change in the future and turn their lives about? Some can, others can't. A few may reoffend and do much worse in the future. I mean, when it comes to the UK, when it comes to France, when it comes to, does it apply to Belgium? I can't remember at the end of the day, but certain countries, European countries, that there's been certain types of people on a watch list. Some may have been released from prison earlier. They've been watched, they've been deemed as a bit radical, a bit brainwashed and a bit extreme, you know what I'm saying? And then they've gone out and done a mass shooting, or maybe a suicide bombing, or a mass stabbing spree. Could have been prevented if they were held longer, investigated quicker. But too often, certain types of people out there, certain groups, can do this and do that, and that the government and others in power knew, but didn't do much about it. And then the people on the receiving end, general public. So when referring back to certain individuals out there, such as in the US, that might have got involved in pretty violent actions back then, such as Bibbins, such as James Brenner, are they deserving? Can they be trusted with a firearm in the future? Maybe not. Okay? Do you want to risk it? Do you want to risk a death of another innocent person in the future? Right? You look at James Brenner, an individual that was involved in the Maryland shooting back then. As we saw, it was documented in the news article, was it the 1970s or the 1980s? Maryland shooting. It was reduced by the lawyer also as a fatal wounding, but originally it was going to be treated as almost like attempted murder, but it was reduced to attempted wounding, which is still bad enough. Was it a full-on intent to kill or just to make someone feel pain? Not quite sure, it depends how you look at it, right? But you can still consider Brenner being dangerous and nasty. Snapping, losing control or not, planned or not, it happened, and he hurt someone with the usage of a firearm. And then times in the future where he was supposedly firing his firearm off to scare people away if they got too close, waving it about to threaten and intimidate people. And I think it also mentioned that Brenner's ex-girlfriend, the usage of a firearm as well, threatening behaviour there. It just doesn't quite line up too well, okay? You hear about just as a question, right? I don't know if it's too late to do it as a poll right now, or maybe we've done it earlier on. I'll try and figure that out at some point. But when it comes to James Brenner, at least, with his involvement in the past, with his criminal history, and the usage of firearms being caught up in that too, as well as hurting someone, shooting someone, and the possibility of taking out Dylan Rounds as well, possibility with the evidence backed up. Would you be willing to allow Brenner to have a firearm in the future to defend himself when he's used it for the wrong reasons in the past? Feel free to vote. Yes, no, would you trust him or just not allow him to have one? We flip that around to Bibbins now. With what we've heard of Bibbins, attempted rape, attempted murder, aggravated assault, violently attacking people, as well as cops, regardless of the role, the hierarchy. That's what he's done in the past. The past is the past. What about the future? Is it different? Not always. But if you're just referring to Bibbins' past history, his violent nature back then, would he be trusted with a firearm now, simply for self-defense? Or is there a possibility that down the line, he could use it for the wrong reasons, possibly once again? I just want to know your thoughts on that, okay? I said it might vary. If you had a different individual that has simply stolen some money on a very small scale nature, no threatening behaviour, no usage of firearms, just no armed robbery, just simply stealing something but still getting in trouble, maybe you'd be possibly more likely to allow them to defend themselves in the future. Even if they're not allowed to, maybe from the general public viewpoint, you could say, well, that person's kind of harmless. They've not used firearms in the past for the wrong reason, so they should be allowed to have one now for self-defense. But as I said, opinions can vary, right? All about cautiousness. If people have done bad things in the past, you could be a bit more cautious of them in the future. Could it happen once again? On a smaller scale, it has. Microcosm, possibly. When you look at the Dylan Rounds community and you look at groups out there, how people associate with one another, break up, depart, reform, rebrand, break apart, reform, rebrand, endless cycle. Do they keep one another alive like some kind of life support machine? They need one another. Even if they hate one another, they need each other for that survival on YouTube? Maybe. But my predictions have come true over and over again with time, how things would play out, the repetitiveness of it, but also the cautiousness of, sure, a person may have broken away from Salty Pancake's channel or from Jim Terry's channel or from somebody else's out there, wherever, whenever, and just in general in life. Someone can break away from a group out there which you may not be too pleased of. You might have been on the receiving end of a certain group or community out there. You've seen the negative dark side. And then you've got a person breaking away who no longer wants to associate themselves with that group, but now they want to interact with you. You have every right to be somewhat cautious and alert. Some people could throw it back right at you and accuse you of judging a book by its cover, something like that, or generalizing, saying it's not fair of you to think everybody in that group and community is equally as bad as one another when there are some good, decent people out there tied up in that group. You're not going to know, are you? You may know in the future, but not immediately. There's no harm in defending yourself without the usage of a firearm. This is a completely different situation, okay? Not as serious, maybe not as important, but important to one's self and possible survival, okay? You don't want to get brainwashed. You don't want to get hurt. You don't want to be mentally twisted or messed up in the hair. You may have been on the receiving end of bad stuff in the past from certain type of people out there. You might be more cautious and more wary of them in the future. There is nothing wrong with that, okay? There's nothing wrong with defending your own mindset, defending your own alert and cautious levels if it can protect you for the future. If people want to take that away, then wouldn't that mean that people want you to get hurt and damaged over and over again? That seems a little bit strange and odd, right? But I guess that seems to be the case. I mean, I myself have been, what would be like a real life example. So in the past, UK, certain type of people that wear hoodies, okay, may cover their faces. In the past, might have been the odd few bad experiences or threatening, intimidating experience. One time at Christmas, very young child, almost group of people kicked in the door. Yeah, they might have grown up now. They might have families now. They might be in a relationship with somebody, but at one point in the past, they were pricks and they intimidated fear upon people. Okay, and I was on the receiving end of it. There were other examples as well, but I'm just giving one on the spot. So that in the future, what happened was, whenever I was out somewhere, whatever reason, or coming back from school or going to college, if I saw people with hoodies on and certain clothing, I would be more cautious. I would be more alert and aware, just in case. They might be very innocent, they might be nice, but I'm not going to know. I'm going to be cautious within. I might judge a book by its cover within. I might generalize within, but it's not going to harm anyone, is it, if I keep it all in here? It's like, I keep my distance, they keep theirs. I might be keeping my distance from theirs for different reasons to protect myself, and there's nothing wrong with that, okay? Maybe if I gave a monologue and explained exactly why I was avoiding them, they could take it and say, that's offensive, that's racist, that's this, that's that. Well, just don't say it. Keep it in here. Be alert, be cautious, try to adapt if possible. There's no harm. If it can make you better off down the line, or it just simply limits damage caused, damage limitation, okay? Yes, at times in life, damage is done. Things are fucked, okay? But if you can try and minimize it from getting any worse, then maybe that's a possibility, okay? So you can see the building blocks, how you can upscale it from piece to piece. So referring back to the microcosm of, you can get some people out there, they've done bad things, or they may have associated with bad things, and then they break away, they want to start again, fresh, new life, whatever. You got to still be cautious. So equally, like with the Dylan Rounds case, which just so happens to be almost like a gangster's paradise, because it's not just the people directly within the case that just so happen to have a criminal history or a reoccurring one. Look at people in the community, a range of people that may have mugshots. So what? What does that mean? That means nothing. It just so happens that some of those people who've got criminal experience in the past and a criminal history and have recorded mugshots, some of them at least have shown very toxic, nasty behaviour in the Dylan Rounds community at times. And it just so happens that some of the crimes committed back then translate to the same types of methods used in the Dylan Rounds case when it may come to a form of harassment, maybe a form of stalking from some people's experiences, impersonation. Some people could say bullying, I don't know. But you get what I'm saying, how some people out there that commit crimes in the past, in the future, their old dark ways can return. And what they may have done back then is kind of similar to what's happened now, okay? And other times when it doesn't happen, you could still be a bit cautious and wary as the possibilities of it happening once again. Do you want to be on the receiving end of it? No. Do you want to be able to defend yourself, even if it's in a minuscule way? Even if it just slightly raises the chances of being better off? I think so, right? With the Dylan Rounds case, directly within, there are people with a criminal history, and those that are simply on the outside, a part of the community, or were once part of the community. Also, some have a criminal history. And at the end of the day, some of them, collectively, their past can repeat on themselves for the future. But you're not always aware of who will be the one to do that. So collectively, you're cautious of everyone, okay? How does this link back to Bibbins, though? Being treated as a suspect just because he's got a criminal past history? Well, I'll explain the foundations right now. As I clearly said at the beginning of the map analysis of when I did it at the time, I said, if there is an alibi of Bibbins to suggest he wasn't here on the day, he could be elsewhere, meaning he may have not seen anything. Okay, so I was kind of defending Bibbins early on, which was good of me to do so. But I also maintained balance by also stating that if he wasn't there on a different day, Could he have returned and then heard about something or had a conversation with Brenner or Bibbins? Brenner or Don Hatley, I mean, right? There's a possibility. I said, if it needs to be referred to again, what are the factors which qualifies Bibbins to being or should have been treated or should still be treated as a person of interest or a suspect or a witness, under whichever category? Well, Bibbins lives in the area. Bibbins arguably lives closer to the Grainshed property, the crime scene. Bibbins lives closer there to the crime scene compared to Don Hatley. Yeah, arguably, I'll say possibly, Don Hatley was maybe questioned and treated more in a suspicious way than the likes of Bibbins was, and yet Don is further away. But the thing that qualifies Don within this, besides location roughly, is because Don was in the presence of Brenner in the afternoon after Brenner supposedly did what he did to Dylan. So with Don being in the presence of Brenner and being a long-time friend, Don may know things other people don't. Brenner may have opened up to Don at the time. You never know. So there's that there. Linking back to Bibbins though, Bibbins being in the location, that can qualify a person of interest. Bibbins knowing Dylan Rounds to an extent, right? And probably seeing him pass by at times, maybe. So that can qualify there. And if not, Bibbins interacting with Brenner at points in time. At the moment, on the day of Dylan's death, I'm not quite sure. Possibility though, but at least what we've heard in the past. Bibbins possibly feeling guilty in helping Brenner at a time when Brenner did his leg in, when he was going on to disability allowance. Right, it was Bibbins that gave Brenner a lift to different places, including Walmart. Right? I don't know if that ties in with the Walmart receipt. That went very quiet pretty quickly. It's not been mentioned ever since, so make of that as you will. But does that make sense? That Bibbins has interacted with Brenner and that Don has interacted with Brenner. Maybe like some kind of triangular effect. If there was no alibi with Bibbins to say he was out of town and that he was actually within the area, his actual location, making him a person of interest, the location, the witness element can come into play. What did you see on that day? What did you hear? Okay? That can apply to Don as well. Don, what did you see? What did you hear at the time of Dylan's death or when Brenner visited you? Did he say anything? Did he look different? Was there anything off about him? Some of those questions that could have been used at the time, right? I mean, Don did interact with the police at the time and gave false locations. He supposedly passed the lie detector test, but he gave false directions and lied face-to-face to the police early on about Dylan possibly being taken to, Pilot Peak, at the top of that mountain. It took, 2 to 4 hours to get there by police to find nothing. But the police came back down and told him off. Why would Don lie about that? To divert police elsewhere? Is that kind of like what Kurt Wadsworth did about that decoy, possibly, of Dylan being held hostage in Montello when he wasn't? Opportunistic behaviour? I wonder. Is there any opportunistic behaviour with Bibbins or not? See, the other factor, what you can throw in, and this is where it does come to judging a book by its cover, not to protect yourself, but to defend somebody. And that's not always as natural, is it? It could be a bit biased. People can look at Bibbins right now without hearing about his criminal history and say, oh, he's an old man, he's 70 plus years old, he's vulnerable, he's got a bad leg or something, or once had a bad leg. Oh, he could never harm anyone. Over time, you would have had serial killers and many more dangerous people, even the Las Vegas shooter that time of a certain older age, still very capable, okay? People may like to put themselves down or put others down by their abilities and what they're capable of for the right or wrong reasons just based off age, but up to a certain age, I'd say, even much higher up, a person can still be capable of doing well, but also doing bad. There's been some, people online 100 or 90 plus year old bodybuilders, 70, 80 plus year old males or females entering a powerlifting competition and breaking a record. You could look at them and think, oh, they're all old and brittle, they're not capable. And yet look what they pull off, some of which may be lifting heavier than a much younger person, okay? It can happen. But then equally, for the wrong reasons, you give someone a gun. Even if you had somebody with no legs, one eye, and was in a wheelchair, but they had a firearm, they could be pretty dangerous, okay? A person in a wheelchair, visibly restricted and limited, but still having the ability to pull a trigger, is more dangerous than a 7 foot tall, 300-pound, very strong, muscular individual from a certain distance away. Because that person in the wheelchair can just pull the trigger, bang, and that bullet can put that massive, muscular, fit person down. Look, you look at people that train in the military, okay? Maybe certain requirements and training methods differ from military to military group, and some of it might be outside of the military or after retirement, I don't know. But, you know, people in the military in certain areas push themselves, go through brutal regimes and training measurements to be as fit as possible and, you know, go for selection and be picked. Survival of the fittest, possibly. And you see some soldiers really muscular, pushing themselves, all that stamina, all that training, all that running, everything they've been through to then get deployed in a battlefield and maybe, just unluckily, get hit by a stray bullet or missile. That's it, game over. What was that all for? Doing all that training, did it prevent death? No, doesn't guarantee it, okay? So that's why it links back to Bibbins. You can look at Bibbins, his age, how he looks at this point in time. Oh, he's vulnerable. He means no harm. Really? People are capable of many things, no matter the age. Remember that. When looking at Bibbins, and then you tie it in with his history, you can be cautious, you can be wary. And certain laws can be put in place to protect the general public from those type of people. There's Sam. So, one thing to acknowledge, whether it be what Badger Life said or somebody else, one fair point to mention. When it comes to James Brenner, before the 3rd of March 2023, when it comes to Chase Venstra, when it comes to Robert Aviles, when it comes to Bibbins, all have a criminal history, past and some present, and, you know, maybe for the future too. But most of these charges, if not all, unrelated to Dylan Round's case. I understand that. So when we focus in on Bibbins, he's been charged for this, he's been charged for that in the past, and more so recently, he's been arrested for being in possession of a firearm when he's not allowed to. How does that link to the Dylan Rounds case? Well, I have said clearly in previous videos, that itself doesn't link to Dylan's case. But the patterns and trends suggest, based off the framework of James Brenner, who at the start was treated as the killer, as the one, before all the evidence came on in, okay? People were really locked in on Brenner. Why? Why should he be a person of interest? Why should he be treated as a suspect? Oh, because he falls under the category of proximity, location at the scene of the crime. Certain phone pings, if you want to include that too. Knowing Dylan, because as I've said, sometimes when often when people are killed, it could be by somebody that they know, friend, family member, etc. So Brenner knows Dylan, Dylan knows Brenner. There could be something there that could qualify the person for being a person of interest or a suspect. But Brenner just happens to have a past criminal history too. That could make things a bit unsettling and something to look into as well for a reference point, right? People were really all in at the time. It's Brenner, and that's even before the additional key turning point evidence came out. What I'm trying to say is, when people were really hammering hard on Brenner at the time, how many were there to support Brenner and claim his innocence? Not as many, maybe none at all early on, okay? That's what I'm saying, early on. I did look at Brenner, but I also looked at others. That was me maintaining balance, right? And I've demonstrated it still to this day. But it seems like the moment the focus shifts elsewhere, and more so in recent time, I have my own, visual look and focus onto somebody, it's now deemed as not right. It was right then for a person people may have not liked, but because I'm covering somebody now where people either have a neutral feeling on or they just aren't fazed by it, they think, oh, why are you going after that person? Look, the only comparison I can give, okay, in fairness, when I had to defend myself in the Dylan Rounds community, I defended myself against Salty Pancakes, against Jim Tay Mr. X. There was a certain procedure that I did, and many people were okay with it, including, regular viewers. But the moment I defended myself against another individual, such as Bob Farrell, there were certain viewers on my channel who looked up to Bob Farrell and didn't like how I defended myself against him. But how I defended myself against Bob is exactly how I defended myself against all the others out there. It's just that the people that were watching along on my channel at the time didn't like Jim Terry, didn't quite like Salty Pancakes, so they were perfectly fine with me responding the way I did to those type of people out there because the viewers didn't like them either. But the moment I point in a different direction, a direction that some viewers may support a certain somebody, they'll get defensive. Now, I kind of understand that. They're defending people that they like. It might show a bit of loyalty, it might show a bit of care. But you should understand by now, when I say balance, I mean balance. I'm not going after one. I'm not starting a witch hunt on one. I'm not exclusively treating someone in a very certain specific way negatively. I'm doing it across all boards. I'm looking at this person, that person, this person, that one, family member, the lot, right? I can't do it all at once. It wouldn't be possible. So there's a different slot each time I look at certain people. That one, followed by that one, followed by that one, okay? That's just how it's gone, okay? So it's like pass the parcel. When the turn finally comes round, are you happy or not? If not, maybe it's them that don't have the balance or the understanding, right? It's the only example I can give there, but returning back to the Bibbins situation, based off the patterns and trends of what have happened to others, I was merely suggesting the possibility that could that happen with Bibbins as well. And before the research was done, before I learned about Bibbins and his past, I was also very early on, and I'm sure most witnesses will be able to highlight and acknowledge that when I started looking into Bibbins, maybe late to the party, but I said I can't look at everyone early on. I've got to do it over time and spread it out so it's done just right. I was saying early on that when it comes to Bibbins, what are the possibilities based on a certain situation? You look at Brenner, okay? Early on, very early on, taken in on unrelated charges. Yeah, but Brenner is the one. Brenner should be the one tied with the case, but not up to a certain point. Fast forward to March 3rd, is it March? Yeah, March 3rd, 2023, then charged with the murder and desecration of Dylan Rounds. Obviously, the whole court thing is still ongoing, and we'll eventually get to that in the article today, hopefully, but there was a process. The pattern what I was highlighting was, it just so happened that someone like Brenner, a person of interest and a possible suspect early on, because it ticked the boxes, was taken in on unrelated charges, and during that build-up, even though it wasn't tied to those cases because they were unrelated to the Dylan Rounds one, evidence in the background was collected with time and then applied to Brenner. So the initial part of Brenner being taken in wasn't to do with Dylan, but being held in custody prevented Brenner from being able to walk around as a free man and possibly causing any more harm or any more mishap or possibly moving anything else, right? He was held, he was taken in on unrelated charges, but then fast forward on, and evidence tied to the Dylan Rounds case linked to Brenner, and then Brenner would have been questioned upon that, and then action was taken, hence 3rd of March 2023, charged murder and desiccation of Dylan Rounds. Fast forward onwards, the hearing, preliminary hearing, and however it goes from there. One unrelated thing tied on to Brenner being in the situation where he is and where he's at now, right? How it started off. Some things, the beginning factor may not always link to a particular area, such as the Dylan Rounds case, but it still plays a role. And the role is holding Brenner in custody. Okay? When it comes to Bibbins, even though this is later on, I do understand. I was suggesting that when it comes to Bibbins, with Bibbins getting arrested on a certain charge, okay, unrelated to Dylan Rounds' case, is there a possibility that down the line, whilst Bibbins is held in custody or whatever, that evidence will be collected alongside in relation to the Dylan Rounds case and then applied to Bibbins in the future, just like Brenner? Is it a Brenner situation, yes or no? It's not for definite, but I was suggesting the possibilities. And past that point, I just wanted to then go further with Bibbins and look back at the past, look back at his history. You know, is he worse than Brenner, yes or no? And it seemed like yes. So if Brenner has been treated as the one capable of killing Dylan, why can't Bibbins, right? If Bibbins is considerably worse, arguably worse, than Brenner with the past, okay? So it was all, you know, like an analysis, putting it out there, the possibilities of this, of that, of Bibbins linked with this and that, right? Just like how I've always done. It hasn't changed. The only thing that has changed is the person I am questioning or looking at. And if there are supporters out there of that particular person being questioned at the time, I understand why general public would go up in arms about it, because they may know that individual personally and they don't think it's fair that I'm questioning that person that they look up to, maybe, just like how in the community. But as I've said, if balance is going to be demonstrated, balance will be done towards people you don't like and towards people you do like, okay? You want me to go one-sided? We'll see how that goes. Not good at all, okay? You look at the severity of the Kenny Veach M-Cave case, okay? You got family-related members, sister-in-law, Susan Veach. Then you got general public. Then you got so-called experts. And I'm in the middle of it all, right? The key family member, related family member, is pointing out that Kenny is alive, and there is proof and this and that. And I've seen bits and I've presented it on my channel, okay? And it does highlight the possibilities. Do I want to go all in on it? If there's a strong enough piece of evidence to do so, then maybe, but it hasn't quite got to that. It's about building the case as one goes along, right? But still listening to the others, okay? Because the moment you go one-sided, you neglect everything else and it becomes completely obsolete, and they may even take it as an insult and walk away. Look at Dragon's Den, or in the US, the equivalent, Shark Tank. You go in with a plan, you want an investment, you got a business, an invention, whatever it might be. You could go in there immediately and say, you know what? This is what I've got. This is what I've got to present. And the investors could be very impressed and they all make an offer. Okay, decent ones too. You could completely mess the whole deal up right at the end, and it has been done, where the person that's come on to the show says, well, to be honest, from day one, the moment I came into this room, I had my eyes on that investor and only that investor. What does that do? It alienates every other person in the room. So they all say, well, if that's your attitude, I'm out. Why should I be second best, right? And what's happened at times is the dialogue's continued, some more data or money talk has come out, and then that one investor that's still standing, in which that person that's come onto the show once, the wrong thing could be said then, you've got nothing to fall back on to because you've alienated everybody else. So that's why in the Kenny Veach M-Cave case, I want to hear it from all sides. I don't want to completely neglect or abandon one area because it can be seen as a bit rude. And it, of course, imbalanced, unbalanced, it just goes too far down one end and it just messes it all up. You know, maybe other people can't see it, can't feel it. I really can. I genuinely can see the pure mess, right? The reason why I'm still here, such as with the Dylan Rounds case, such as with the channel, is specific key words, okay? You say the wrong word, the wrong line, you have effed up, that's it. Game over, you're dead, okay? Such as the channel. And even in real life, you could say the wrong word, it could result in a life or death situation. Sometimes you've got to take things very serious, okay? You can demonstrate balance. You can hear it from all sides, which means more conversation, which could mean later down the line a bit more understanding. It could even bring people closer together. Not in a delusional positive way, but in a realistic way down the line. There's always that possibility. But you eliminate that possibility of people coming together if you alienate people early on. You've screwed up your chances, okay? So, linking back to the Dylan Rounds case, whether I question people or analyse people in the community, or if I do it directly in the case, I'm not just going to go over a certain person. I'm going to go over as much as I can. Does that make me an enemy of everybody, or maybe respected by everybody? I think it's a bit mix and match, okay? For some, it might suit them when and when not, depending how they're feeling at the time. But see, I'm aware that there are still good people on this channel and still around, okay? But a bit push and shove, going to be a bit realistic. It's been time for me right now to be realistic, okay? So I hope most people understand what's been mentioned just then. This video has gone significantly longer because this is still the intro of the video, okay? So you could argue and say that Badger Life's comment, although not as long, has been equally as long as an autobiography by Christie when long comments have been left. But there's nothing wrong with that, okay? It's good that Badger Life leaves her comments. Hopefully Badger Life is still here to hear the positives, okay? Because as I've said, a bit unrelated, but I'll mention it anyway. There's been times in the past where I might have analysed someone and they felt attacked or they feel they've been insulted, but then I've mentioned a positive. But unfortunately, by the time they may have got insulted, they've walked away or left the channel before they hear the positives, what I've got to say about them. Demonstrating balance, but some people don't want to stick around long enough to hear both, you know, the positives and the negatives. There's not much I can do about that. I'm not going to hold or tie people down with rope because that'll lead to further issues, okay? But it's good that Badger Life left her comments because it enables more conversations and other aspects on this case, right? I don't know if I'll have to reword this whole video or change the title depending on the length of the video. I mean, it's 49 minutes long. This might have to be a part 1, part 2 thing, possibly. I think it's probably for the best. I think it genuinely is positive, practical, okay? I might have to redo this intro, okay, the initial intro of this video, because some very, very important points mentioned today, all because of Badger's comment. Shout out to Badger Life for her comment, as indirectly this has led to a separate individual video besides the actual one I was going to do, which is very unique. It's not really happened that often, that. So what I do want to say in advance, apologies if this video has turned out a bit different, but I'm just taking in mind the time situation. The longer the video goes, the harder it is to upload the video, the file size, the storage and all that. And sometimes the longer a video is, and if it's very deep on a range of different subjects, it can take away from the main part of the video, and I think that's what would happen here. So I still want to do a separate dedicated video to the latest news article tomorrow or the day after when I get time, okay? There are still some, finishing points to make on this video. The only part that I won't change is the comments, what we read through. Okay, so apologies late, if I did mention anything about the article, what we're going to read later on in this video, okay? It's just the timing and everything. But I'm sure I can say part 1, part 2. I can mention it in the description. Hopefully most people have watched till now to understand, okay? I can at least mention in the intro of this video about changing the order and, you know, structure and stuff about. Take in mind, what I'm demonstrating right now is introspection, where I'm showing my thoughts and how I'm calculating things on the spot. This is all raw, all on the spot, no script, just like last night, okay? So there's been a few adjustments. But linking back to Bibbins, linking back to Brenner, okay? They've got a criminal history and they've reoffended. Have they done anything since? Kind of. Brenner, more so a pending one, 2021. But then again, the gun charges in more so recent time, around the time of Dylan's death. So unrelated, but still reoffending. And Brenner knew that, okay? That's why Brenner wanted Don Hatley to have the firearms instead, so Brenner wouldn't get into trouble like how he did the previous time. So he already knew he was screwed. It still messed up and went wrong, so he got in trouble. And Bibbins in more recent time, 8th of November 2023, okay? Unrelated to the Dylan Rounds case, I know, but they've still reoffended. They've not learnt, right? And just as a general thing, when it comes to criminals, people that have a history in the past, they can change, they can become better people with time, and maybe there's people out there that encourage that, but then there'll be also others that say, no, I'm not going to give them a second chance. It's too risky. You can understand it from both points of view, in a way. But there'll be certain crimes people can never redeem themselves, I guess. You might get some people extreme that'll say, well, if that person can be forgiven for that crime, so can that person. So it can raise a lot of discussions and maybe some arguments. I don't know if it will cause any here, but we don't need to go too deep there. But what I'm getting at is, if someone has committed crimes in the past, and those crimes just so happen to be similar to the same outcome or the methods used towards that victim, similar to the Dylan Rounds situation, you could establish a possible link there as well. Just a suggestion. Do we ultimately know how Dylan Rounds was killed? No, so that is unfortunate. You can suggest, though, this person is responsible based off their past action, based off the possibility of how Dylan died. So the example would be Dylan Rounds possibly shot. Is there enough proof of that? No, unfortunate. But I did raise the questions before. Any ballistic test? I even looked at the shed myself looking for holes. Okay, some holes Dale would get stuck into, unfortunately, but that's a completely different subject, that. But didn't really come to much there. There were still important talking points and questions raised, based off a theory, an idea. Nothing wrong with that if the correct wording is used. And I think with time, there's been misunderstandings of the general public towards me, okay? I try and use specific wordings and make it as clear as possible. But maybe because I'm so specific and I'm talking about such deep stuff, it's hard to keep up with. I understand. I understand that at times there could be a language barrier, okay? And I'm not just directly talking about IQ, I'm talking about the language and wording I use, because maybe because I'm from a different country, the words have different meanings compared to other countries. Or certain words used here aren't used elsewhere. Other people may use slang, I might use formal words. It can vary. But, you know, for most part of it, there's been an understanding. The times where there's been a misunderstanding, not always, but it seems to ring a couple of times, the individual just happens to be impetuous. The individual just happens to lack balance. The individual just happens to be a two-faced hypocrite that reveals their true identity down the line, okay? Not always, but it has happened a couple of times to raise that pattern, that trend. Patterns and trends to defend yourself for the future. Patterns and trends to suggest the possibilities of links based off current or previous events with others, right? The reason why I was comparing Bibbins with Brenner is because there were similarities between the two. Characteristics, experiences, crimes committed. There was a crossover. almost in parallel. So I was suggesting whatever happens to Brenner, could Bibbins follow in the same direction? Right? Possibilities, once again. Appropriate wording, once again. Right? So, if Dylan Rounds supposedly was shot and killed, well, out of all the people in Lucerne, who's been known to kill previously? Maybe no one. Who's been the closest to killing someone? Who ranks highest? James Brenner, Maryland shooting, formerly treated or reduced to a fatal wounding. Attempted murder wasn't worded as that, unfortunately, so it would fall second place in the hierarchy. First place, though, Bibbins, attempted murder. It was already there. To kill, the aim, the motive, supposedly speaking, based off how it's been mentioned formally and in the court documents. If people say it's still not enough, what more evidence do you want? A time-travelling machine? Huh? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm trying to think of other examples on the spot, but they'll probably be so dodgy that people will get confused by it. But you get what I'm saying, right? Dylan murdered. Who's the most likeliest of individuals out there to murder Dylan? Have any of them murdered people in the past? Not from what we know of, but some have come close to it, such as Bibbins being the top, attempted murder, how it was officially mentioned in the documents, followed by Brenner, attempted malicious wounding, right? Because initially it was treated as a fatal wounding, but then reduced to just a wounding, right? So those two, capable. Both of them, usage of firearms, well, Brenner definitely. Bibbins, not quite sure the actual method used to attempt to kill somebody. Okay, I acknowledge that, but if it was with the usage of a firearm, then you could say, well, two individuals there, usage of firearms, usage of attempting to kill or harm someone in the past. Now fast forward on, you got another individual that has possibly been shot and murdered. Well, these two have done it in the past. Could they have done it again? Well, based off the fact that they've reoffended over and over again in general, there's still got it within them to reoffend with a specific crime, such as killing someone with a firearm. Is it 100% proven yet? Probably not. But it's those possibilities. You can use those possibilities as a form of planning for the future on what to expect, whether it be to defend yourself, to avoid oncoming negativity and pain coming your direction, to avoid that, or to just understand what could happen next. Because a case like this, with all the twists and turns, anything can happen, right? Anything. So if your mind has been scrambled, messed up, you felt discomfort, you felt uneasy, you felt confused, you felt sick, you felt tired, you've had headaches, whatever it might be, if there's any way you can reduce that for the future but still stick around, then why not take it up, right? If you can reduce your disappointment levels by simply expecting that when the next lot of news comes round will be minimalistic, or when the next update comes around to do with a hearing or the preliminary hearing that something's gone wrong, if you expect and anticipate that to happen early on, when it comes about, it's not going to impact you as bad, is it? I know some people could say it's a fatalistic attitude to have. It's not exactly a positive one, but it could be considered realistic. If it can reduce negativity, then why not implement it, right? If you can become cautious and wary of a community, a true crime one, a mystery one, a food community, whatever it is, shoving poles in your mouth community, I don't know what's out there, to be honest, but if you know what's coming ahead, that's what she said, if you know, you might have a better idea on how to deal with the situation when it comes about. I know there's always factors which can transform everything in an unexpected fashion, but still there's no harm in trying, right? Just like how there's no harm in trying to understand this case when, in the presence of limited material or limited talk, right? All this talk, This analysis, these agreements and disagreements lead to more conversations, more discussions, more ideas, and possibly more progress with time, okay? So, I think that concludes it there. Hopefully I've mentioned as much as possible. I do know I did acknowledge all the comments from the previous video, so that's good to see, and more people being engaged there. Is there anything more to do on Bibbins at this moment in time? No, but there was a series. I explained what was going to happen and what we were going to do, and I followed through with it. And maybe earlier on, before some of the material came about, I was saying how, well, this could link to that. Bibbins could be involved in some way. Well, prove it, prove it. Well, as said, did a bit of research to highlight the possibilities, okay? Yes, you can have evidence to prove that someone did it, but you can also have evidence to suggest someone did it. It all comes down to the strength of the evidence itself. And because of the Dylan Rounds case being very quiet nowadays, it's harder to get a grasp of things. You know, the other factor to why I was talking about Bibbins with the whole pattern and trend of everything is because of that new DNA evidence that was found previously a few months ago, right, by a canine dog. 1 or 2 times, because what we saw by Canis Cooley, 2 verified alerts, 2 deployments of dogs, 2 lots of key DNA evidence found in 2023, possibly. But who does that DNA belong to? Somebody else or Brenner? Don't know. That uncertainty opens the possibility of others. Others in the area. Others that share similarity characteristics with Brenner. Others that share or fall under a person of interest, such as Bibbins, okay? You know, I don't know if it's interchangeable, the terms, or some can fall under or overlap one another, right? A person of interest falling under a witness as well. I guess that applies, right? A person of interest who may know more than others, but they're not letting it on clearly. So they've got to be interrogated or investigated into to try and get the truth. Apologies about the darkness, it's getting darker. The lighting. Can you have a person of interest that falls under as a suspect? Maybe. I said, all these key terms and key words, I'm sure some can overlap with one another. So, you know, the other way of looking at it would be, you can say that Bibbins is or was or should still be a person of interest because of the location they are in, the connections they have to the people involved in this particular case, and what they may have seen or heard at the time if they were in the area. Hopefully that makes sense to people, right? The fact that Justin Rounds commented on Bibbins, okay? Because people all like to gather around Justin Rounds and look up to him, besides Canis Cooley, in which people criticise, for Justin to call out Bibbins. That could be seen as a person of interest. If Bibbins has heard that Brenner threatened to kill Dylan, well, Bibbins is kind of a witness, right? And people could downplay it, water it down and say, yes, but that threat could have been in the past, just like way back in the past when Dylan was the witness of Brenner saying he threatened to kill Dylan's dad, but Dylan's dad wasn't there at the time. But Justin heard about it later when Dylan contacted Justin, his father, about it, right? But still, even if it's not directly at the time, the fact that you've seen the true side of somebody and what they're willing to do or what they are suggesting, oh, that threat of, I'm going to take that person out. Once again, you can judge a book by its cover. You can overlook things and say, well, that person doesn't look much, so they're probably not going to do anything to me, even if they have threatened. They themselves may not be dangerous, but what they have on them could. A knife, a firearm, blunt instrument, whatever. They can use it, right? Dirty tactics, foul play, ambush, or face-to-face. It can vary, right? So there is that to acknowledge. And once again, you look back at people's past, okay, with Brenner. Brenner has been known to harm people in the past and is considered a danger, right? And attempted fatal wounding with a usage of a firearm. So fast forward on, you got Brenner saying, I'm going to threaten to kill Dylan Rounds. I'm going to threaten to kill Dylan's father. 2 lots of threats spaced out. And with the history that Brenner has, it doesn't look good, does it? Now we could say, well, that's going off subject. This is all about Bibbins, right? It's about anyone that could be involved in some way or another. They can interchange and interlink with one another due to location and who they know one another by, right? So whilst Bibbins may have not been the one to have threatened to kill anyone, he's been on the side to hear it from somebody else, which would make him a person of interest if something similar happened to that on the 28th of May if Bibbins was around at the time of the death of Dylan, if Bibbins was near to Brenner, if Bibbins was near to Don. Any conversations exchanged? Any confessions made? We don't know, but is there a possibility? Yes. Person of interest, that's why it equals. A witness, that's why it can equal. A suspect, if Bibbins was told something and told to keep quiet, it's like aiding and abetting. It's assisting in a cover-up, which is also part of a crime, right? So you see how it really can evolve, okay? I said, I'm not some kind of criminal expert. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not the president of the US, but I think some people want me to be. And I don't know much about penguins. Yeah, I've got one. Not a real one, though. But I know it might just put into perspective, right? Because I'm sure there'll be other people out there that might be more qualified, but they don't think as much as I do. That's just an observation. That's all there, okay? But hopefully this video makes sense. Balanced as usual, strengths and weaknesses mentioned, positives and negatives, and comparisons and deep analysis made. Once again, apologies, this should have been about a news update, but that can be done a different day because this video is equally as important and it's opened up new discussions. I'll try and figure out how to title this video because it's quite a heavy one, okay? So we'll leave it there for now. We'll see you next time. Be sure to like, share the video to keep spreading awareness on this case, to keep Dylan Brown's name alive, and we'll see what happens next. Goodbye and good night for now.